Hey, everybody. Thanks for starting your weekend with Bookish. We're the virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life, brought to you as always by the Southern California News Group and the Bay Area News Group. I'm Sam Dunn. I'm the senior editor for premium content. And I want to say thank you. We had a little bit of technical difficulties starting up today for the first time in 2 years, but here we are. I want to say thank you to our Reader Reward subscribers for your support of our ongoing programs. And hey, by the way, if you are a Reader Reward subscriber, attending tonight, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate from our partner and one of our favorite independent bookstores in the Los Angeles area, Once Upon a Time up there in Montrose. And wait, if you're not a subscriber yet, why are you not a subscriber yet? Go to scng.com/subscribe and you can find your local paper there. Join us, and that way you're going to know about all the great things we've got going on. Okay, so many of you have been here before, but just in case you haven't, let me remind you of a few things about the show. If you're here, you're muted to allow for the free flow of conversation. We're going to have an intimate show tonight with just a few panelists, and we want to be able to let that conversation flow. But if you have questions, and really we hope you do, use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar. If you want to add a comment or talk to other people, use the chat feature also found on your screen. Behind the scene, we've got SCNG's books editor, Eric Peterson, who's going to be answering questions and handling the chat. So thank you, Eric. By the way, this session is videotaped and a link will be sent to you so you can share or just revisit some of your favorite moments if you'd like. It's also posted at scng.com/virtual events, and that's where you can find all of our past shows as well as see what's coming up next. Anyway, speaking of coming up next, now it's my pleasure to introduce our much beloved Bookish host. She is the writer, performer, and radio commentator you might know from NPR's Morning Edition and This American Life. She is also a contributing editor to The Atlantic and host of the syndicated daily radio minute, The Lowdown on Science. She's the author of many books, and her most recent is The Madwoman and the Roomba. Beaming to us from her bohemian splendor in Pasadena, please welcome my friend Sandra Tsing Loh. Sandra, how are you?
Hello, I come to you on a different computer today due to technical snafu day. So if I'm peering and I look like that, it's because I'm on a different computer.
Yeah, wait, is it Mercury in retrograde today? Because this is weird.
Anyway, well, it's going to be a really fun bookish day today. You know, it's kind of like it's been a hell of a year. We don't need to remind everyone why. So we thought we would take a moment on this bookish to change things up in June, the time of weddings, Father's Days, graduations, happy news, and take like some time off for love and laughter.
Love and laughter. I love it. So by that, do we mean rom-coms?
Yes, we do.
And by that, do we mean Nora Ephron rom-coms?
Yes, we do.
And by that, do we mean You've Got Mail, When Harry Met Sally?
Sleepless in Seattle.
I love, you know, maybe it's because I have a son, but I love that little boy in Sleepless in Seattle, who was Tom Hanks' son, right? Who sets up his dad with Meg Ryan. Yeah.
With Meg Ryan, he's calling the radio psychologist on the evening radio show.
Yes, and what was her name? The dulcet tones of her voice.
Calming voice. If only, Samantha, okay, get ready for it. This is our one technical trick. Due to the magic of Bookish Zoom, if only we could conjure the radio psychiatrist from Sleepless.
If only. Magic!
Evening. From Network America and the movie Sleepless in Seattle, I'm Dr. Marcia Fieldstone, and welcome all you enthusiastic readers to Bookish.
Our dreams can come true.
And scene. If we do nothing else today, that was completely worth it. That is, of course, not just Dr. Marcia Fieldstone, but the fabulous Caroline Aaron, who played Dr. Fieldstone in the movie Sleepless in Seattle, and on so many other projects that we're gonna, and of course, most lately, Shirley Maisel on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Am I saying that right? Not Maisel. So, yes.
I will let you girls get to it because I know you've got a lot to talk about.
Okay, so what we're gonna do first is, Caroline, you're gonna stay on, if you will, and we're gonna talk first of all to our first guest. And you were actually interviewed in her book, so I can't turn you off or away. And then we'll chat more with you, but you can sort of co-host with me.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. So first up, June gives us a new biography of Nora Ephron, entitled Nora Ephron, by Kristin Marguerite Doidge. The 32nd download. In a first ever comprehensive portrait of this Manhattan-born girl, Doidge explores the tremendous successes and disappointing failures Ephron had as a popular essayist turned screenwriter turned film director, featuring interviews with some of Ephron's closest friends, collaborators, and colleagues, including actors Tom Hanks and Caroline Aaron, who's right here with us now, comedian Martin Short, composer George Fenton, and lifelong friends from Wellesley to New York to Hollywood. Award-winning journalist and cultural critic Doidge has written a captivating story of a life of a creative writer whose passion for the perfect one-liner and ferocious drive to succeed revolutionized journalism, comedy, and film. Welcome, Kristin.
Hi, thank you so much. So great to be here.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to tell you how I feel seeing Kristin again and when I met her the first time. And she told me she was writing a book on Nora. And I was so thrilled and moved because I think, I mean, this is such a generalization. We can debate it, but I think it is very hard for women to be popular. And once they become popular, they're considered inconsequential. So you can't win. And all of a sudden, I see this beautiful young woman who could be my daughter saying Nora is important and she's still relevant. And so, Kristin, I'll let you take that away because that's what really moved me. I didn't want Nora to be in the past ever.
Yes.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sandra and Caroline. And that means so much to me. And I just likewise was so moved by meeting you and also just by getting to have the opportunity to get to study Nora's life and work and, to get to hear from the people who, really loved her and like you said, still want her presence to be known, and to grow even further. There's a whole new generation of writers and journalists and filmmakers who are just starting to discover Nora and her work. And so it's really fun to get to see that.
So I wonder if you could walk us through, and my kids are 21 and 20, so they're of the new generation. Walk us through Nora Ephron as her life as a writer, which spanned several decades. And if you could start even just with her parents even.
Yeah, so Nora was born in 1941, just 6 months, a little less than 6 months before Pearl Harbor. So just to give us some context there, she's the oldest of 4 girls, all of whom became writers. And her parents were both writers. They were playwrights, and Phoebe and Henry, as Phoebe would appreciate being first in the in the list. Phoebe and Henry had started to consider possibly going to Los Angeles and considering a career in screenwriting. Went there and came back to New York and started working on a play called Three's a Family, which was partially inspired by Nora at 2.5. So she really kind of had her debut in some ways on Broadway at 2.5. And as she would retell it, was ripped from New York and forced to live in Beverly Hills with all of the happy blonde people here. And that's where she was. She went to Beverly Hills High. She was very athletic and very good student. She graduated as a valedictorian. She had skipped a grade. So very, very bright, very ambitious. And she also was, of course, a writer. And so she, one of the really fun things about the book was getting to talk to some of her friends from camp. She went to summer camp every summer from the time she was, a little girl, and then all the way up through her teenage years. She eventually became a junior counselor, which is ironically also how her parents had met. They were both summer counselors. So she really started to hone this skill of writing. What she said that she would you would only get a letter back from your mom if you wrote one first. And so she really started to gain, experience with her voice in that way. But she also at camp was really experimenting with being a comedian. One of her best friends growing up was Marcia Levant, and she was very inspired by her father, Oscar Levant's sort of self-deprecating humor and that sort of thing. And so she really just thought it was a blast. She was obviously in her element, getting to perform and be on stage. Her sweet little sister Delia was not a fan. She was like, "This is horrible. We're being sent away." But they survived. And the first chance she had, Nora was back on the East Coast, and went to Wellesley, and of course became a very important part of Wellesley News while she was there. And this was late 50s, early 60s. They covered a lot of really controversial things that were happening at the time. They had a visit, Malcolm X had come to campus, and, they were kind of questioning a lot of the, political issues of the day. So she was not afraid to, as she would call it, be a troublemaker. And so that was kind of her foray into writing.
And I think it's such a fascinating story that, she went into the new journalism and was an essay writer.
Mhm.
And then I wonder if you could take us to the era of heartburn, how that came, what happened, and what happened to her and how she responded. And a movie that I believe, Caroline, you're in.
That's
I
right.
think that was the very first movie I was in, was Heartburn.
Yes. So if you could take us to that part of her life.
Sure. Well, I love this. I love this topic with Caroline present, because it gets us to talk about Mike Nichols, which is also a really wonderful and lovely part of Nora's personal and professional life. So she had come at her first film as a reporter, which was Silkwood, which was about a real person, which was about Karen Silkwood, the whistleblower. And that was in 1983. And when she and her co-writer Alice Arlen wrote Silkwood, Mike Nichols allowed them to come and be on the set and really participate and see how the movie was made. And she just thought that was wonderful and amazing, and was, again, studying and taking notes. And so I believe it was while they were filming, or maybe shortly after, when Heartburn, the novel, came out, which of course was about her divorce with Carl Bernstein, and all of her wonderful recipes in between. She, before the book was even published, I believe Mike asked her, "Could I have the film rights for this?" And so she was like, "Sure, I trust you with it." And so they started working on the script together for Heartburn, which came out in 1986. And so yeah, I'm sure Caroline has many wonderful memories of that time, but yeah.
Well, and we're so lucky to have Caroline aboard in this format. So Caroline, what was working with Mike Nichols like?
Well, I'll tell you my audition story for Heartburn. So
Perfect.
I'll tell you how I had to audition. So I was taking an acting class with the great Uta Hagen, and Mike Nichols was the guest director, the guest teacher that day. And he saw some scene work that I did, and he got in touch with his casting director to summon me to audition for Heartburn. Well, can you imagine how thrilling that was? So I went, these are the days when you did things in person. So I went to the Carlisle Hotel, where they had a hotel room set up for auditions, very elegant. They spaced us far apart, so people were not kept waiting, and they weren't being, hoarded into a small space. And I walked in the room, I was just trembling. I mean, just trembling. And I was just about to start, and Nora goes like this to Mike, "I want something salty," just like that. I was like, they just started having conversation about food. Well, I was sitting there and I thought I was going to die. And then finally, they just sort of turned their attention back to me. And as I got to know them more and more and work with them more and more, they were both geniuses at putting people at ease. Because Mike, as a director, knew that he would never get the best from someone if they were nervous to be in his presence. There would be no way he could see what you could do, and when you were really open and you felt really safe. So that was my introduction to Nora. And I just was so fascinated by her. She was on the set the entire time, which I come to find out as I went along this, Yellow Brick Road, that it's the screenwriter being on the set it's like having an astronaut on the set. It is the most, it just never happens. They're not there. They're not part of the mechanics, according to many directors, of the movie that's being made. Do you know what I mean? It's just wouldn't happen. So, but
I do.
And Nora's there every single day. We didn't know she was going to be a director, but really collaborating with Mike constantly the whole time. And this was her story. And it was so interesting because you said the name of this show today is like, we're going to have some love and laughter. And it made me think of Nora because she was genetically upbeat, no matter how much pain she was in. She just really, it was very inspiring in that way. She got knocked about a bit. And I think the biggest blow was Carl Bernstein. And what did she do? She wrote a comic novel that became a hit rom-com movie. What a great way to respond to heartbreak.
Yeah, and I want to go back to your experience, but I want to go back to Kristin's book for a moment, just to get the complete arc of it out, and then I'm going to go back to you, Caroline, to ask you about a couple of things. So, Kristin, to this point that is Caroline saying, and I think that sitting down and reading this book, it's a really interesting read because it is like a story. You make it into a story about a woman's life, and I think that for people who are curious to read your book, it is a wonderful tale of her growing up as a child, going through these movies, developing, When Harry Met Sally with Rob Reiner, that's a great section there, and all the rest of her movies. And it's really fun to read. And then you get to the end of her life also. So Kristin, with this notion of when Caroline is saying she's, genetically upbeat, can you talk about the end of her life and her book, not just the end of her life, but then how you came away as a biographer at the end of considering this story? Just a two-part question.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that Caroline's point is so important because a lot of times we think about people getting a terrible diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis, and all of a sudden they change how they want to live life. But what was so fascinating about Nora is she already lived life like that. Like Caroline said, this tiny moment that Caroline tells so beautifully about the Nichols and Nora kind of conversation about something salty. It's like, that's the most important thing right now, is that we find something delicious and salty. And that she just really embraced that, like for such a intelligent person and, creative person, she really, really appreciated and embraced simple things too. She loved food. And really, from my understanding, a lot of the foods she really liked the most were kind of simple, like Americana, macaroni and cheese, fried chicken, things like that. And pie, of course, pie. So to me, it feels like exploring what it must have been like for her to get this news, which they initially thought was basically, they were told, she only had 6 months to live when she was first diagnosed with this blood disorder. I think she, of course, was terrified, but she also, even more so, embraced writing and living and loving and all of those things, which I think is incredibly powerful and brave.
And is that then finally, is that an inspiration for you? What did you, I guess my last question to you, what find personally drew you to Nora Ephron's story? As Caroline says, you are a young woman, you're of another generation. What draws a younger generation to Nora Ephron, her work, her story, and how did that resonate for you?
Yeah, I was in journalism school at the time when I first started really researching and, digging into Nora's material and her work. And I really hadn't known her as a journalist. I only knew her as the filmmaker. And so to go back and realize that she had this whole other life and all of these things she had experienced, I just thought was astounding. And the more I dug in, the more I wanted to know. And it became, 7 or 8 years worth off and on of research and interviews and getting to, really try to understand, like, what was it like to be Nora Ephron, coming from a generation where, at the time, by the time you're 20, you pretty much are expected to be settled in with whatever it is you're doing. And she's someone who's saying, I don't see why you have to do that when you're 30, 40, and 50. Why can I not just change my mind? And that was just the thing that really resonated with me and I thought was so magical, because it's like, she says about Sleepless, which actually, maybe this is a good segue into talking to Caroline about this. She always said, had she not met Nick Pileggi, who was her third husband and really, love of her life, she said, had I not met him, I wouldn't have made Sleepless. And so this really interesting intersection between life and work and life, becomes so interesting and so fun to get to explore, because this is a person who has experienced really hard and painful things, as a child, and just like we all do in life. And so all of her optimism is informed by that, which just makes it so much more meaningful.
Mm-hmm. And didn't she write something, Kristin, I think I read in the book, it's either one of her essays, What I Will Miss, What I Will Not Miss. Mm-hmm. And I think that came, and it is a very economical and heartbreaking and funny list. Mm-hmm. And I think the last one of What I Will Miss is pie. Mm-hmm. I think that's the last thing she will miss is pie. Mm-hmm. Isn't that great?
It's so great. And on the What I Won't Miss list is email a few times. She wrote it a couple of times. And she, it's like, I just want to make the point that I'm not going to miss email. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And I think in looking at the book, I was just thinking of her last movie, Julie and Julia, of the younger generation looking towards another generation, and that great conversation between the two. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that this book really does that really, really beautifully. So I'm going to say thank you, Kristin, because now we're going to focus on Caroline. So
yes,
we're going to be talking,
as you should. Yes.
Thank you so much, Kristin Marguerite Doidge. Your new biography on Nora Ephron is called Nora Ephron.
And let me just say, I want to just endorse this because I read it and I really adored it, because I felt like I was with Nora. And that's the thing about it, is it's everybody's chance to sit down in her living room with her. That's the way it made me feel. So don't pass that up.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Kristin. Okay, now to you, Caroline. This is you. Okay, so you've had such an amazing career. I mean, everybody knows you. When you pop on screen, they know your face. They know your wonderful, can I call it gravelly voice?
Yes,
you've been, you were in Sleepless in Seattle. You've starred in several Woody Allen movies. You've played his sister, for God's sake. You were in Edward Scissorhands. Even Stanley Tucci's Big Night. You're the lady who doesn't like her spaghetti at the beginning. It's like every time you look, you're on screen, you've been in everything. So, and of course, now you're slaying it as Shirley Maisel in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But can you talk about the kind of the career that you've had? I mean, and that interlaces with Nora Ephron. What do you call yourself in terms of a career?
Well, I'm still waiting to have it, which is why I have so many credits on my resume. I think I'm just interested in lots of different things and lots of different people. And so what like when you mentioned Nora, I thought, it's so funny because this isn't very strategic in an acting career. But what I've gravitated towards, or what's gravitated towards me, even from the beginning, is I've never had, I've never headlined the movie. I've never had the kind of parts that I believe that I can handle. But what I have had is a front row seat to some of the greatest directors and creators in the entertainment industry. And I'm a repeat offender over and over again. I got to work with Nora, and I feel like I've been so informed by their talent. It's contagious when it's that big. They're happy to give some of it away. And so I feel really lucky about that. I think people would call me a character actor. I think all actors, if they're any good, are character actors. That's just my personal prejudice. So I guess that's what you would call me. I mean, I was thinking the other day, I really must make a list of the things I'm too old to play and put it up on my bulletin board and really make myself believe it, because I can't believe that I'm not going to do Bus Stop or something, with a 30-year-old floozy, because I did those scenes in class. I was just waiting for my turn.
So, and in terms of the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I mean, we've talked about the Ephron, the Ephron effect and sort of that aesthetic. And to a certain extent, I mean, the Mrs. Maisel, that show is so smart and funny and comic. Do you see any of a sense of Ephron-like a theme there in terms of what working on?
I can tell you directly. I mean, I wouldn't have known this, but the brilliant creator, writer of Gilmore Girls, and now the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, said to me one day in rehearsal, she had been reading something about Nora Ephron. I don't know what it was. And she said, "Oh, so you're a Nora Ephron girl." And she said, "Me too." And we didn't discuss it more than that, but I went, "Oh my God," when people have gigantic, iconic breakthrough barriers talent, like Nora did, like Mike did, stuff like that, they do have offspring all over the place. And I think that Amy Palladino is a Nora Ephron offspring.
And by that, and what do you mean by that? I mean, what's it like working with a director like that?
Well, she's the director-writer, as Nora was the director-writer many times. So she's bringing her vision. You've been invited into her vision to life. But what her point of view is that you're a woman, you're already starting back at least 200 paces, which means you have to have bigger strides and bigger balls. And they both had that unbelievably. And Amy is very sort of aware of that. She's incredibly witty, which is her way of expressing her rage, which is the same thing that I think was true of Nora. I think Amy is in a rage most of the time, and she's talented enough to make that into a really funny TV show. But underneath it, I mean, it's not something you would even know off the bat, but the second season we were doing press in Milan for the show, because it's the biggest surprise in the world that it's like an international hit. And every time we do press, I want to interview them and go, "Why do you like it?" Because there's no intersection, when you're talking to a journalist from like Brazil, and I go, "Brazil." When they first sent me the script, I went, "Okay, Jews will like it. New Yorkers will like it. That's a lot of people." But I never expected it to like break through all these boundaries. But I think that, when we were doing press, somebody said, would Midge, that's our heroine, get back together with Joel, that's my son. And Amy just looked at the journalist and she went, "I would never do that to a woman. He over. No, he doesn't get her back." I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used that word, but that's what I'm just quoting. But she was very clear that she was not going to let that happen. She said the most important relationship in this show is between two women who are for each other. It's from our comedian and her manager. And she went, "We don't get to see women before each other in a really big way on television." So this all reminds me very much of whatever things Nora was doing that was appropriate to the time that she was the only female journalist at the Post. So you can just imagine. So I do think of Amy as one of her offspring.
Well, and I think you are a great stage actress, also not just movies and television. And you were in the original. If people don't know this play, Love, Loss, and What I Wore, the Nora and Delia Ephron, the play, and you were in the original Los Angeles cast at the Geffen Playhouse and the cast is amazing, with you, Carol Kane, Natasha Lyonne, Tracy Ellis Ross, and Rita Wilson. My goodness. Okay. So for those who are not familiar with the play, can you describe a little bit of what that play is like and what your experience was being in it?
That play was taken from a book that Nora optioned. That wasn't published for the public originally. It was a grandmother who wrote a book about her clothes that were packed away in a trunk for her granddaughter to open someday. And they ended up sort of narrating this woman's life, and it was turned into a book, and Nora immediately bought it. So instead of following the book, what she and Delia did was they had these salons with really good friends, and they said, talk to me about the most important piece of clothing in your life and what it means. And they configured these monologues. And then when I was in the play, you didn't know this, it wasn't like part of the program, but one of the very first monologues was about a bathrobe, beautiful bathrobe. And it was being worn by the second wife. And when the adult daughter comes over, her mother was dead and her stepmother was in her bathrobe, and what that had, how that had pierced her. And then I came to find out that that was Rosie O'Donnell's story. I mean, they weren't hiding the authorship, but it was all of these experiences that they kept collecting of women and clothes, all kinds of women. And then the narrative thread through it was the book, was this woman drawing pictures for her granddaughter of all her clothes. So when I was in the LA production, the other gals had done it multiple times in different places because the play wasn't new. It had been running in New York as a hit. So Nora called Tracy and Natasha and Rita and Carol her all-stars. So I got invited as the rookie onto the all-star team. And I don't know if people know, but the conceit of the play was that we were reading from notebooks at music stands, but by that time they had pretty much memorized these monologues. They were divided up into these 5 women, and then interstitially.
By the way, you know who's on? Jenny Sullivan is saying hello.
Oh, hello, Jenny, our director.
The great director of Love, Loss, and What I Wore, and the go-to. But continue. I'm sorry.
And in between all these monologues were these interstitial clotheslines that we all participated in, experiences about being female. So what was so great about being with the All-Stars is you have no idea how things are going to land in an audience. They'd done it with different casts. They would tell me exactly what to do. They'd go, you'll get a laugh if you do this. You should hold off on that. Because I had 1.5 days of rehearsal. Because they didn't think we needed more than that. I thought I needed about 1.5 months. But anyway, I had those girls to pull me along, and I had the play. I mean, you couldn't tell when you read it. It landed on people. People just loved it. And it just conjured so much for them. I mean, you saw it, It's like people couldn't stop talking about,
and
things.
Because when you see it on the page, you're not sure if this is going to work. And then people say these monologues out loud. There's grief, there's loss, there's laughter. It's really.
The sort of 11 o'clock number of all these monologues is called The Purse. And it's about 15 minutes long. And unbeknownst to me, it's sort of the choice monologue in terms of Nora's bequests when she divides them up. So I got to do it. And of course, it was just such a vintage Nora. It was a rant that lasted maybe 10 or 11 minutes about how she could not find a purse that was useful and did the job she wanted it to do. And she went through the whole history of purses. I even had to do research. Like she tells a story in this monologue about going to Paris and her friend buying a Kelly bag and getting it for $6,000 and what a bargain that was. And then there was a downpour and, of rain to get back to the hotel. And Nora just loved that happened to her friend, that her bag got rained out. And so it was really, really, really funny. But I went $6,000 for a purse. And then I found out they cost $40,000. And so she took you through sort of like the history of what that is in this one monologue until she finally just settles on a big plastic bag with the New York subway map on it.
The Metro bag card.
Yes.
And Jenny Sullivan also says she still has her Metro bag card. And yes, and I think that monologue is it's just hilarious, and it goes on, and you're right, it goes on, and I can only imagine you doing it.
I was so out of breath. It was like a workout.
Right. That you hate the purse.
Yes, you just hate it so much. And I so identified with it. That's why I could talk about rage. Nora was in a rage about that, and I completely get it. I still do. That's the thing that I think that Kristin captured in the book, and everything Nora wrote was personal. even if you couldn't directly, that's my lesson over and over again, is that whatever you want to express, make it personal.
So finally, and I guess this will be the last question to you, and it's been so fun talking to you. I know in the chat, people are really enjoying just being able to do a deep dive with you. So, I mean, as a woman and as a creative artist, I mean, what in the end, and you've worked with Nora and knew her and worked on. So, I mean, what do you personally carry forward in your life? And the qualities that inspired you about her.
She's brave. She's far more brave than I am. But I mean, I want to be around brave people, so it rubs off on me. I think it's very hard to be brave, and it's hard to be brave right now. And Nora literally seemed fearless, and I'm sure she wasn't. I think that I just read this great essay by Tennessee Williams, and he is describing a journalist that said to him once, "Tennessee, don't you think you have writer's block?" Because his latest play had been trashed, and he went, "I always have writer's block. My need, though, and talent has always managed to get past it somehow." And I just think Nora probably had as much fear, I mean, probably more, because of the time she was born in. The things she did as a woman were really scary. But I think her fearlessness just carried her all the way through. I mean, she directed movies, a woman directed movies and hit rom-coms that made lots of money. It never happened before. Just didn't happen.
Right.
We forget that, because after the doors are open, you forget that they used to be locked. Women are making great movies. Women are doing lots of things they didn't do when Nora was here.
Well, yeah, and so are you, Missy, as you like to say. You're so inspiring and fantastic, and we really
thank you.
Loved having the opportunity to chat with you about all things Nora. And so the great Caroline Aaron, not just on Sleepless in Seattle, Dr. Marcia Fieldstone, but of course you are Shirley Maisel in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And if you, for those few of you who haven't seen it and need an intro, then you could just YouTube Shirley Maisel's accounting methods. That's all you need to do. Shirley Maisel accounting, you'll bust a gut, and love and laughter, and we couldn't have had a better chat with you than we did. So yes. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you guys so much. I'll speak soon, I hope.
Speak soon. And back to you, Sam.
Thank you so much. This was such a great, intimate, sweet evening. Thank you. You brought the love and the laughter, Sandra and Kristin, and of course Caroline, goddess. And I want to say thanks to our production manager, who did not have an easy day today. The Oz behind the curtain, Julie Corlett. Thank you, Julie. And also Eric Peterson, our books editor, is also behind the curtain. Thank you, Eric. And don't forget, everyone, the Nora Ephron biography by Kristin is available at Once Upon a Time bookstore. But you don't have to wait that long for great content on authors. Please sign up for the Book Pages newsletter that Eric edits and writes, and subscribe to our papers for more great book news. And if you'd like to share your thoughts from today, or you have suggestions, or you just have additional questions, or you just want to tell us anything, please email us at events@scng.com. We'll hope to see you next month again. We're going to be doing some highlights from the fabulous moments of the past 2 years. Can you believe it? We've been doing this 2 years, Sandra. Anyway, have a great weekend, everyone. Much love and laughter. Have a great time. Bye.